Hi guys, welcome to our video about independent and dependent clauses. So first, as always, make sure you are taking good notes while you're watching. All right, so we need to talk about what a clause is before we really get into this video. So a clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a predicate, which I know sounds very similar to what we talked about when we were talking about sentences recently, and you are absolutely right about that. So first we have independent clauses. So an independent clause is a part of a sentence, but it does make a complete sentence on its own, which is why the clause description and a sentence description sound so similar. So here's an example. If I'm late for school again, I will have to go to detention. The part that's highlighted in purple here, I will have to go to detention, that is an independent clause. If we took away the part that's not in purple, it would still be a complete sentence, and that makes it an independent clause. So now we have dependent clauses. So a dependent clause is also a part of a sentence. It also contains a subject and a predicate, just like a complete sentence or an independent clause. However, it does not make a complete sentence on its own. And this is because it begins with a subordinate conjunction. So here we have an example. If I'm late for school again, I will have to go to detention. Here, the part that's highlighted in purple is a dependent clause. If I am late for school again, that leaves you asking, well, what else? So it's not a complete sentence on its own. And that's because of the word if at the beginning. That is one of those subordinate conjunctions that turns what would be a complete thought, I am late for school again, into a dependent clause with that if. It leaves us asking, yeah, and what else? That's why it needs the rest of the sentence, that independent clause, to make a complete sentence. So let's talk about those conjunctions. So subordinate conjunctions. These provide a necessary transition between two ideas in a sentence. That if in our previous example is really important. This transition will indicate maybe a time, place, cause, and effect relationship. So in our previous sentence, it was that cause and effect, right? If this happens, then this will happen. So here are some examples of subordinate conjunctions. After, as, because, before, even if, once, since, so, that, than, though, unless, until, when, where, whereas, whether, while, why. Those are just some examples of subordinate conjunctions. So let's talk about how we punctuate this type of sentence when we have dependent and independent clauses. So if the dependent clause comes before the independent clause in a sentence, you need to use a comma. So here's some examples. If I'm late for school again, I will have to go to detention. So we can see the first part of that sentence is the dependent clause, and therefore we need a comma to separate our dependent and independent clause. But if I reverse the order and I put the independent clause first, like in this sentence, we don't need that comma anymore. So I will have to go to detention if I'm late for school again. So it all depends on the order of your clauses. Even if we look up here at my explanation of how to punctuate this, I have a dependent clause first. If the independent clause comes before, if the dependent clause comes before the independent clause in a sentence, that's a dependent clause. And because it comes first, I need to separate it from my independent clause with a comma. All right, so thank you for watching. Make sure to check your notes and rewatch any parts of this video that you need to.